Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are tearing into the historic May 2026 summit between Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. We're going to decode this massive geopolitical shift by looking past all the carefully choreographed diplomatic optics, to uncover what the operational reality is actually like on the ground. Okay, let's dive right into this. A comprehensive strategic partnership with no limits. You've probably heard this phrase, right? It's basically defined international relations since 2022, and it was forcefully reiterated at the 2026 summit. Both capitals use this rhetoric very deliberately. It's their foundational narrative to project stability and ultimately to position themselves as a serious counterweight to the Western liberal order. But we really have to stop and ask the critical question here. What does no limits actually look like in practice? If we completely strip away the diplomatic facade, what does this actually mean for the global distribution of power and global markets on a day-to-day level? Well, that is exactly what we're breaking down today. So here's our roadmap. We'll start with the 2026 strategic milestone, build out the economic foundation, look at military ties, zoom out to the global ripple effects, and finally assess the durability and structural limits of this whole setup. Section 1. The 2026 strategic milestone. Set against the massive backdrop of the Great Hall of the People, this wasn't just your standard political meeting. It was a highly choreographed quarter-century anniversary. Think about it. 25 years ago, the Treaty of Good Neighborliness was signed. Then came the 2022 No Limits framework, which led straight to this moment. This timeline really reveals two things for us: Beijing's intense, long-term strategic patience and the incredible durability of Moscow's pivot to the east, even despite unprecedented Western sanctions. We're literally looking at a quarter-century of compounding alignment. But, we've got to separate the facade from the actual foundation. Those handshakes and shared walks, they're essentially a dual-use instrument. On the domestic front, Putin gets to show he absolutely isn't isolated, and Xi gets to play the global statesman. But globally, it's a giant neon sign pointing right at the global south, basically saying that alternative development and security models are very much open for business. Let's move to Section 2, building the economic foundation. $240 billion. Just let that number sink in for a second. That is the massive annual bilateral trade volume these two nations hit by early 2026. The data clearly shows this isn't just some temporary wartime band-aid to bypass sanctions. No, this is a fundamental, structural reorientation of two massive global economies directly towards one another. And what exactly makes up that $240 billion? Well, it's not just energy anymore. Sure, Russia is pumping wheat, soy, and natural gas through the power of Siberia pipeline, but Chinese electric vehicles and automakers now absolutely dominate the Russian market. They're even co-developing semiconductor packaging. And this brilliantly illustrates how their domestic industries aren't just trading. They are literally fusing together. Okay, prepare yourself for what is probably the most staggering figure of this entire explainer: 90%. Over 90% of that massive bilateral trade is now settled exclusively in yuan and rubles. I mean, that is a highly coordinated, aggressive push for alternative payment rails. Let's actually look under the hood at the plumbing of this de-dollarization. Step 1, the deliberate policy decision to shift away from the US dollar. Step 2, the crucial infrastructure play, linking China's SIP system with Russia's SPFS system. They are completely bypassing Western clearinghouses like SWIFT. The end result? Total insulation from Western financial leverage. It's a real game changer. Moving on to Section 3, military ties, no formal alliance. When we actually analyze their joint capabilities based on the facts, we're seeing some real, frankly, terrifying operational interoperability taking shape. We're talking combined arms drills in the Vostok exercises and joint bomber patrols skirting right near Japanese and Alaskan airspace. By sharing critical defense tech, everything from aerospace to cyber frameworks, they are drastically reducing operational friction for whenever they decide to act together on the global stage. Now, what's really interesting about this is the deliberate asymmetry. A formal alliance requires mutual defense clauses. It's essentially buying the ring and committing to fight the other guy's wars. Strategic coordination, on the other hand, that allows for joint drills and tech sharing without all that legal baggage. Neither Beijing nor Moscow wants to send their troops to die in the other's distant conflicts. They just want the deterrence factor while keeping their own strategic autonomy completely intact. Section 4, the global ripple effects. So how is the rest of the planet reacting to this? It's fascinating. India is playing this very delicate balancing act, partnering with Russia and China in BRICS while simultaneously countering them alongside the West in the Quad. Central Asian states are locking hard into Chinese infrastructure. ASEAN nations, they are aggressively hedging their bets. Meanwhile, Japan views this whole situation as a five-alarm fire and is rapidly accelerating its defense modernization. For NATO and Washington, the strategic calculus has fundamentally flipped. Western capitals realize that this Eurasian partnership just can't be dismantled by economic sanctions alone. Instead, they're being forced to adapt. They're expanding Indo-Pacific liaison frameworks and competing on governance and developmental terms, rather than just seeking a direct, head-on ideological confrontation. Finally, Section 5, Durability and Structural Limits. If we want to understand the long-term viability of this 2026 milestone, we absolutely have to talk about the elephant in the room: asymmetry. Let's be real. The stark reality is that China holds overwhelming economic, technological, and demographic advantages here. Over time, this structural imbalance, gradually but inevitably, forces Russia right into the role of the junior strategic partner. So, the crucial point is that despite all that no-limits rhetoric we explored earlier, it turns out there are actually plenty of limits. They have overlapping, competing influence in Central Asia. They are very carefully eyeing each other over Arctic resource governance. Throw in massive trade imbalances and vastly different appetites for regional conflicts, and you've got a recipe for some real long-term friction. Which brings us to the actual 2026 reality. This axis absolutely provides a highly operational alternative governance model that looks incredibly appealing to the global South. It accelerates financial pluralism and completely complicates Western deterrence. But because of those structural limits we just talked about, it functions much more as a central node in a multipolar system, not some rigid hegemonic bloc aiming for total global domination. I want to leave you with this one final question to chew on. Is this partnership just a temporary marriage of convenience, driven by current events? Or are we looking at the actual enduring blueprint for a new multipolar world? As we've seen today, this convergence is actively rewriting 21st century international relations. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.